And most people have Netflix at this point, so you can also check out Boys in the Band, directed by Joe Mantello. Also got his earned his chops in stage acting, like things like Wicked, I believe, was one of his first shows.
Just saw him in Hollywood this year. He's also primarily an actor, really.
And Boys in the Band was a play back from the 1960s, I believe 1968, went off Broadway and was revived by the cast you see in the film on Netflix back in 2018. If I recall, that won a ton of Tonys and received a lot of acclaim.
Yeah, won Best Revival that year, yes.
And I mean, the cast on this is just stacked. You know, you have Jim Parsons. I'm blanking on all the names. Of course,
Zachary Quinto.
Yes, thank
Andrew
you.
Reynolds.
Yep. So
Matt
you have a ton of very talented and experienced actors here telling this story about being a gay man in America back in the 1960s, 1970s. Time is a little bit, not specifically said, but I found this to be a really intense and moving watch, but not something that totally made me feel like, wow, and I'm not quite sure exactly why. I think I'm still kind of working it out in my head. This has I believe an 80% Rotten Tomatoes, so 4/5 of people say that this is a really, really good movie, and especially I think an adaptation of a play to a movie. Where do you stand with it?
Yeah, I think it starts off really strong too, because I was immediately taken with the theatrical nature of the film adaptation. It's very much staged like a play.
Yeah.
It's basically just set in this one apartment, a very impressive apartment, might I add. One thing that briefly took me out of it when I was told that Jim Parsons' character doesn't pay any of his bills, yet somehow lives in a great apartment with a balcony and a second story, like a duplex thing. I was like, wow, that's definitely a product of the 60s. Cool. Yep. But as you watch it, and you see the dialogue, it's pretty consistent, right? Because it's a movie, because it's a play, just about people talking in rooms. That's all it is. And it'll live and die based on the strength of that acting and the strength of that script. And like you said, as you said, this is the reunion of the cast from the revival, just like the movie from 1970 was the reunion of the cast from the play in 68. And it was interesting to me seeing this for the first time, and I had never seen any other versions of it, seeing this after something like Call Me By Your Name, because of how different they are, right? Obviously, both versions of the play and movie are featuring all out gay men in the cast. And yet, this is a criticism of the play at the time, and yet you're getting a lot of the woe is me, self-loathing nature to the gay story and gay experience, right, in America. And that's something that has almost reinforced stereotypes in the past. So I can understand where that criticism came from. But from what I understand, the play and everything kind of had a critical reawakening when it's kind of realized that this was more about this was by gay people for gay people first, and it's inherently that audience is going to get more out of it than other people. But I still really liked it, and I think that was because I think the performances are really committed. You have to imagine that this is when you've done this play so many times, you can kind of just make this movie in your sleep for this cast. I have to imagine it was pretty easy. And I thought it really looked awesome. And just kind of thinking about it, right? Because this is taking place in 68. This is on the cusp of the gay liberation movement, right? So it makes sense that all these men are struggling with their identity in some way, because that's what it was like back then. Right. And I think it gives you a lot to chew on, just because it kind of throws a lot at you pretty quickly. And I liked most of the performances. Jim Parsons, carries most of the movie, and he inherently does a lot of Jim Parsons things, including becoming a very grating presence as his character gets drunker and more antagonistic and whatnot.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, Parsons' character in a lot of ways, especially as he got drunker, reminded me of his character from Hollywood in a sense, you know. And I think that was a little bit distracting for me because I was like, oh, this feels like I just was watching you do this on Netflix a little while ago. But I think the probably the most interesting scene, and I think the scene people go back to is the phone call scene, right? I guess technically just the whole third act is this dare that Jim Parsons is this game, but also really a dare that Jim Parsons is making everybody in the room play to call their past loves and kind of kick up these like emotional scars and wounds for themselves. And it brings to the surface, I think, a lot of the issues that people who are struggling with that gender identity or that sexual identity uh, maybe go through it at times. I mean, not obviously not all people go through that, but um, I think it was interesting seeing Andrew Rannell's character talk through with his boyfriend, how he doesn't believe in monogamy and he doesn't
Yeah,
really want to stay committed and things like that. I thought that was a really interesting issue to flesh out. I really liked when Harold, Quinto, kind of confronted Jim Parsons about his own self hatred and how he's projecting that onto everybody by making them play this game in this way. That was a really strong moment that kind of like took my breath away in a sense watching this. So there's like some really awesome moments. I think it's also just heavy in a lot of ways because these
yeah,
are people who are all struggling in different senses for different things, and kind of just leaves you feeling a bit broken at the end. It's tough at points. What were some scenes or moments that really stood out to you?
yeah. I mean, to that point, what you're saying, everybody in the cast for the most part is kind of bringing something to the table in terms of what their character is, right? Like how they touch on like Emery's presence as someone who's very flamboyant and effeminate
Yep.
and out, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
you contrast that with someone like Bernard, who also has to be a black gay man on top of
Mm-hmm.
just being a gay man, right?
Yep.
And I mean, what was Harold, right? Like Harold's dealing with aging and
Mm-hmm.
becoming less, his self worth declining as a result, right? And then you have the cowboy dude who's
Yeah.
just getting racked on for being handsome yet unintelligent. It's
Yeah. Bit dim.
like wow, it's quite the party, I guess, right? I guess one thing that I felt was predictable was what's his name, Alan, uh, Alan obviously
Calling his
having
wife.
something going on
Oh
was
yeah.
pretty obvious, right? Like it's not explicitly said, right? And I believe that's the way the play stages it too, is that there's an ambiguity to that, and the ending of the thing in general is kind of
Mm-hmm.
ambiguous. But yeah, there's kind of a lot to chew on with this, and um, I just kind of like watching everyone vamp and kind of go
Yeah.
back and forth. And again, it's a lovely apartment to spend time in.
That is the really nice thing about adapting a play to screen is those moments that you would get for each character on a theater stage are a little bit more emphasized and highlighted here, like being so close to Jim Parsons as his character is just berating these people to make these phone calls, or like the close up on um, the Michael Benjamin who played Bernard, and as he was kind of like realizing what he had done and like the
Mm-hmm.
emotional wounds he had opened, it just was like really, I think, hits you um, in a way that you don't get watching it just like a longer or like a further back shot, like you were sitting in the crowd or something like that. So some I think this is impressive in a lot of ways, and there's some really great stuff here. I just think it's maybe not a movie I'll find myself going back to too much, but great performances, like you said. Any
Yeah,
last thoughts? You
yeah.
good?
No, I mean, this was a Ryan Murphy production.
He's
he helped
working,
he helped get this stage play to the screen
and we
in a
can't wait for
certain sense.
Monster.
Hey,
Always something with that guy.
Netflix is keeping him busy, but this is actually
Uh,
a good use of his talents, I'd say.
I agree.
He's the most prolific gay producer there is right now. I'm pretty sure. So it's
Hmm.
kind of makes sense that they would make sure he gave everything he could to this. And uh, Joe Mantello, he was also in the Normal Heart. He's been pretty active lately, and I liked him a lot in Hollywood. So that Murphy synergy coming back. So yeah, didn't really know what to expect going in, and I was pleasantly surprised by the boys in the band.